Hi Global Gardeners, welcome to another week. Last time in Global Gardens, you got to hear and talk with Miss Jenny all about Oklahoma native plants, the traits that plants have that make them survive and thrive in the state and the environment that we live in. This week, we're going to talk more about how plants survive, and not just in Oklahoma, but in all kinds of crazy environments and situations. So we're going to have some fun. Let's do it. Today, we're going to talk about plant defense mechanisms. Big word alert. All right, so let's break it down so we know exactly what we're going to be talking about. Defense mechanisms. The first word we're going to look at is defend. Okay, when you're defending your goal, if you're playing soccer, you're making sure the other team doesn't score. Superheroes defend people, making sure that crazy stuff doesn't happen, right? You're protecting something when you defend it. That second word is a word that scientists love to use, and you're a scientist, so I'm sure you'll be using it as soon as you learn it. A mechanism is just a part of a machine or a person or a plant that does a specific job, right? So a plant defense mechanism is a certain part of the plant or trait that the plant has that protects it, right? But now you're probably wondering, okay, I get it. I get what a plant defense mechanism is. It's something that protects the plant. But what do plants even need to protect about? They got it made in the shade. They just lay around, soaking in the sun, drinking drinks, growing big and strong. What do they even have to defend against? A lot, all right? There's ferocious herbivores out there, caterpillars, birds, bunnies, worms, all kinds of crazy things that are just feasting, literally eating plants alive, right? They have a lot to defend against. Not only that, there's the environment, right? They need the sun, but not too much sun. But what if they don't get enough sun? And they need water, but what if it rains way too much or not enough? Or what if the wind blows so hard that it knocks them over, right? The plants have so much in the environment and in the animals around them that they have to defend themselves against. So they have armored themselves up, and they have a lot of amazing traits and tricks up their sleeves to defend themselves, right? So we are literally going to explore some of these plants around me and talk about a few of these plant defense mechanisms. So let's pretend that you're a plant, right? And you need to defend yourself against excess sunlight, excess heat, just it's baking down on you because you live in the desert. Or maybe you live in a place that has drought like we do from time to time in Oklahoma. A lot of plants that have to deal with intense heat will protect themselves by digging roots super deep into the ground. We call that a taproot. They also often, like any cacti or a cactus that you've ever seen, will soak in as much water as they possibly can anytime it rains, so that as they're standing out there in the beating sun, defending themselves against the extreme weather, they've got all that stored up water, right? So now we know a little bit about how plants defend themselves against extreme heat, not enough water, too much sun kind of situation, right? They dig deep roots so they can get water, they soak in that water, they hold on to it, right? But what if there's way too much shade and this plant is just living in the dark shadows, around the corner of your house where there's not a lot of sun, or in the rainforest where there's so much vegetation and trees and plants everywhere that the sun barely gets through, right? What do those plants do to make sure they defend themselves against that lack of sunlight? Well, some plants create vines, and here we have a vine. You can see this plant has already started doing its trick, right? Where it is curving the structure of the plant towards the sunlight, right? Trying to get around the corner of this porch here right now, because vines are one of the best ways that plants defend themselves against not getting enough sunlight, right? Well, what if you live in an area that just gets way too much rain sometimes, right? Or when it does rain, it pours and it floods, like parts of the rainforest or different parts of the country. So if a plant lives in an area that has way too much rain, sometimes it will shape itself in a way that funnels that water right away from it, right? So the leaves will have this really cool, interesting shape that traps the water and runs it away so it doesn't rot its roots. Or they'll have waxy feeling leaves that don't soak in the sun, the water as much and just runs right off of those plants, right? So we've talked about way too much sun. We've talked about way too much water and not enough sunlight. But let's say this plant is trying to survive on the side of a mountain. How is it going to defend itself against those strong winds going past the mountain all the time? Or it's living out in the prairie where the wind comes swishing down the plains. How does that song go? Anyways, let's say it lives on the prairie and there's way too much wind. These plants will grow super close to the ground and just cover the ground and make sure that they don't have anything to really get swept away, right? Or they'll dig their roots really deep down, just like a plant that might live where they don't get enough water. Deep down. So plants, we know they can survive strong winds by growing close to the earth. We know they can survive strong, intense heat. We've talked about too much water, not enough water. But what if the big problem that a plant has to defend itself against is birds or bunnies in your garden? All these cute little herbivores that we think are just so adorable and wouldn't harm a thing, guess what? They'll eat up your garden. So some of the most classic things that a plant will do to keep itself safe from those ferocious herbivores is smell bad. I mean, if you're super stinky, is your brother or sister want to give you a big hug? No way, they're gonna go, pee you. That's so stinky. This plant, not only does it grow close to the earth so that it would be protected against strong winds, it has such a strong, fragrant smell. Just like this plant right here. This plant is called citronella, and it has such a beautiful citrus smell, but it's a strong smell that, guess what? Insects don't like it. It keeps bugs away from it because the smell is so strong, right? Little bunnies, they hate onions and garlic because they smell so intense, so they go running and hiding. So we got stink. One of the best ways plants protect themselves is by smelling bad, right? So another thing that they do is they're sticky, right? No one likes a sticky mess. It's like, ew, maybe you play with slime for a minute, but eventually if it gets too sticky, that's not fun. The best slime isn't sticky. It's smooth, right? So just like, you know, maple syrup comes from trees. If you were a bird trying to tap into that tree, that syrup wouldn't be sweet to you, right? It would be sticky and a mess. And have you ever broken open a plant and felt how sticky it feels on your fingers? Some plants on the inside are super sticky, and herbivores don't want to eat a sticky meal. All right, so let's say a plant isn't really very sticky, and maybe it doesn't have a super strong smell, like a tree, a big strong tree. How does a tree that doesn't have a strong smell and doesn't have sap on the inside protect itself? That hard bark all around the tree, hard, rigid stems and barks really protect plants, right? They keep them safe from the birds and the other herbivores that come trying to munch them up and make a snack out of them. So we've got hard branches and stems and just prickly things. Prickly, that's the word we're looking for. Would you ever just give a cactus a big hug? You know, just wrap your arms really tight around it? No way, because it would hurt, right? It would be so awful to give a cactus a hug because it's covered in spines. What about the thorns on a rose? These prickly thorns and spikes, and even sometimes fuzzy-like hairs. I have a plant right here, and if you look really closely, which I'm not sure if the picture will pick this up, but this plant is actually really fuzzy, right? The stems are hairy, and we don't care because we're humans and big, but guess what would really care about all the little hairs on that stem? A caterpillar trying to crawl up this stem, it would scratch its belly, those little hairs. So plants are hairy, they're prickly, they're spiny, they're stinky, they're sticky, they're hard and covered in bark, and guess what else? They can be straight up toxic, okay? Some plants are so determined to defend themselves against herbivores that they are toxic. And if a person or an animal of any type eats that plant, they'll get sick or they'll get a rash. They'll have some type of reaction that says, whoa, this plant is dangerous, right? So there's some plants that are really on the defense, right? That they have just covered themselves in all types of mechanisms to keep themselves safe. And this week, you're going to get the chance not only to explore those plants more, but also to build and imagine your own plant. What in your imagination would be the ultimate defense against ferocious herbivores, extreme weather, all types of apocalyptic situations? So start thinking, because we are going to create our own plant defense mechanisms. Okay, so we talked all about the ways that plants defend themselves, the defense mechanisms that plants have. There's some plant defense mechanisms that are actually really amazing to creatures that aren't trying to devour them, like herbivores. Like, some plants have an amazing smell. There are other defense mechanisms, though, that we talked about that make plants poisonous and toxic to the things around them. Let's think about these words outside of just the universe and world of plants. Every person has defense mechanisms, things that they do as a human that keeps them safe, right? So some of us have experienced a lot of hard and unsafe situations, and we have all kinds of defense mechanisms, ways of thinking and doing things that keep our hearts and our minds safe. So from time to time, when you're thinking about yourself and the way that you operate as a human, just like plants operate in their natural environment, it can be a really good mental exercise to ask yourself, how do I keep myself safe? And are those defense mechanisms, just like plants have, healthy for me and the people around me? Because sometimes we can be really mean to people around us because we're afraid of being hurt, right? But that defense mechanism isn't actually healthy for the people around us. But there are some defense mechanisms, like talking to friends and family when you feel overwhelmed, that bring to you beautiful things, just like the strong smell of some plants is actually beautiful to us as people. So think about maybe write in your journal or talk with a close grown-up or friend about what you do to keep yourself safe, and if those things are really actually working for you. All right, guys, I can't wait to see you in person sometime. Have a great day. Bye.